Well, hey there. Good evening, my weary summer indulgent people. I would imagine you guys have had a great night of getting sunburnt, probably drinking too much at the pool, going to barbecues, and, having that summer fun. And don't get me wrong, we're doing the same thing. So, yeah, the main show's on hiatus, but, of course, I am here. And I'm going to deliver on a promise to you that I'm going to give you some strange things that happened during the summer. And they're going to be UFO, UAP, however the hell you want to frame it. That's what they're going to be about. This particular one, though, I got to admit, we're going to kind of depart from the summertime a little bit. That's okay. It's not going to make it any less spooky, any less interesting. But this didn't exactly happen in the summer. But, man, it is really a great story to talk about around a campfire. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a cold one. And you can get a little closer to the fire. It's okay. It's not going to hurt you, well, at least if you don't sit on it. We all know that the summer nights can get a little bit chilly. So, yeah, grab a s'mores, grab your fellow companions in a nice way. And let's get ready for an interesting story, shall we? So there's going to be some of you that understand this pretty well, and there's going to be others that don't. But if you have ever lived in a rural area, and I'm not talking about suburbia. Suburbia is not rural. I understand that now. I didn't when I was younger. But, the difference between, San Diego downtown and then let's say Santee or El Cajon. Yeah, that is not rural. That's just suburbia. When I'm talking rural, guys, there are places in this country where the stars still outnumber the porch lights, where the only thing louder than the cicadas is the silence itself, and it can be deafening. Now, Delphos, Kansas, that's one of these places. Small town America, where things are supposed to make sense. Until the night the sky hummed, the dirt glowed, and the story got weird enough to leave a mark we still can't explain. Now, let's give you guys a little bit of context here, okay? So, this happened in November 2nd of 1971. Again, I know it's not exactly the summertime, but hey, this one, grant me a little bit of leeway and runway on this one, because it's so good, it needs to be told as a summer story. So, November 2nd, 1971, it's autumn in Kansas. Now, this is post-harvest. So, when I say post-harvest, those of you who don't know, think of a cornfield. Usually you see the cornfields where they're huge, like in the movie Signs, where it's just, they tower over people. Well, this is not the case. This is all after all that's been cut down, okay? And that's important for this story. Now, the air is usually really crisp, and it gets dark fast, real fast. Now, when I say dark, we're used to living, at least I am, used to living like in the West where, let's face it, in Arizona, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. The sun's out, guns out, right? I mean, it's sunshine until it's not. And it's usually about the same time every day. That is not the case in the Midwest, let me tell you. Now let's talk about Delphos for a second. Now the population's under 500. That's small, guys. I mean, we're talking super small. There's no airports, no drone lights because, hello, it's 1971. And there's certainly no TikTok hoaxes. You like that? TikTok. I always joke around with my daughter. I call it Tic-Tac. But anyway, I'm sure I'm not the only middle-aged man that does that. Anyway, and this certainly isn't Roswell. It's not Phoenix. This is not a military town. This is in the middle of nowhere. Now, if you've never been through rural Kansas, let me explain something to you. There is middle of Missouri rural, and there is middle of Kansas rural. They are different. I remember a time when Nicole and I went on a Colorado trip. So we went up through Kansas City to meet up with some folks, and then we shot over to Denver, and literally right through the heart of Kansas. Now, I love Kansas. Don't get me wrong. You guys are great. A lot of really cool things come out of Kansas, but I think we can all agree you could go hours and hours of distance and the scenery stays the same. And it just is. It's a beautiful country. There's nothing wrong. It's just it is very vastly different than especially what I thought rural was. I mean, it's empty. And I say that, and of course, off the streets. I'm sure there's homes and there's people, of course, that live in those roads. But for us, it's pretty open territory for us. Now, you should picture these long, lonely dirt roads, dusty trucks, fields that go on forever. And there was this teenager named Ronnie Johnson. So Ronnie Johnson, this is important because he's kind of he's the centerpiece of this whole story. Okay. Now, who is he? He's 16 years old. He's what people would consider probably a typical Kansas farm kid. He's not known for telling tall tales. I mean, if you guys have kind of ever been around some farmers, and honestly, this isn't just related to farmers, but farmers like to take that, my word is my bond. They're very tight knit because they rely on each other. You get through some of these really, really bad winters. These farmers need each other to help each other out. And if you're not, if your word isn't worth anything, then you're not going to get any help. So farmers like to make sure that everybody knows that they're a man of integrity. Okay. Now, Ronnie was no different. Now, he was out doing chores, I think somewhere around 7 p.m., and he was checking on livestock near the family shed. Now, his dog, Snowball, is with him. And I would imagine, we've got a couple dogs, and one of them is an Australian Shepherd. And let me tell you, well, he's a mini Aussie, honestly. But, these dogs, they're what they call Velcro dogs. And a lot of farmers' dogs are like that. They go with them on the plows. They go with them on the big combines. It's a different relationship than maybe it is in the city for some folks with these dogs. But anyway, his dog Snowball is with him. Now, when you think about this story, I guess you think about kind of the way this object appears. And we're going to talk about the sighting here. Okay. Well, we kind of already disclosed it's 7 p.m. It's dark. You've just been out working, the fields or whatever Ronnie was doing at the time. Now, all of a sudden, a bright circular object appears near the shed. Now, it's just 75 feet away. Now, if you're in this much of an opening, 75 feet away, if you're standing there, it may seem like a far ways away, but you can probably see everything, right? So what Ronnie reports is there's this it emits a loud buzzing or humming sound. And it kind of sounds like a transformer or like an old radio stuck between stations. I mean, we all know if you're a paranormal investigator and you have like one of those SB7s or something like that, you know exactly what we're talking about. It's just that buzz and that crackle and all those sort of things. Now, this is coming from an object 75 feet away hovering. So, yeah, kind of scary. Now, he describes it as a dome-shaped object, and it has a metallic sheen. Now, it's glowing whitish blue light. It's intense, but not blinding. Now, it's about 8 feet wide, hovering 2 to 3 feet just above the ground. And appear to have a fuzzy or misty border, kind of like a heat distortion or some kind of energy field. And, if you're thinking about this, here's this buzz, here's this humming. You're thinking about this radio transmission. The part I always am concerned about is how that impacts the mind. So, yeah, that might come into play here in a little bit. But, here's Ronnie. He sees this thing. It's up in the sky. Well, 2 to 3 feet off the ground. I mean, that's high enough for you, high enough for me for sure. And it's got all these crazy things happening. It's bright, but it's not blinding. So he can see this thing dead to rights. Now, the interesting part is Snowball. Now, Snowball, just like most dogs you can imagine, pins his ears back, starts growling. He won't move forward, just whimpers and cowers. Now, the dog is described as very protective, so has very abnormal behavior. Really, it's fear. This dog's scared of something. He sees this thing. He doesn't know what it is. So now you've got verification from an animal that you can't actually speak words with that you guys are seeing the same thing. Now, kind of talking a little bit about this humming, and I kind of alluded to this just a few seconds ago. Now, Ronnie said the humming caused a weird sensation, kind of like the hair on his arm stood up on end. Now, some of you who have ever been in large EMF fields, you kind of know that feeling. It gives you kind of a weird tingling feeling, and yeah, your hair does feel like it's standing up on end for sure. And some people go momentarily numb. There's a lot of weird things that happen with EMF, but this is a humming. So we don't know for sure what's coming off this thing. But Ronnie's already reporting some physical differences the second it shows up. Now, he stood and watched for maybe like 90 seconds before the object slowly rose in the air. No wind, no engine, no exhaust. So think about that. Got this buzzing, got this weird stuff going on. And as Ronnie's standing there looking, it literally goes up with no movement, sound, or whatever. So it's interesting. And you hear this a lot with UFOs and UAPs, that you don't hear any engine noise, you don't hear any propulsion noise. But this is one of the very few times you're actually hearing or feeling something like a static. Anyway, he reports it darts away diagonally and vanishes. No sound is left. Just silence, and the silence we were talking about before. Now, when we talk about propulsion sound, had it been a drone, I think we all know what drones sound like, right? You know, even the smaller ones, you get that really high-pitched whirl, and you get into those some big, huge, like studio quality, Hollywood-type drones, and they are loud. And if you've ever been near one, there's no way you can mistake it. It's got a ton of lights, and just the rudder wash is crazy. Now, you gotta remember something. Here we are, 2025. This is 1971. So that didn't exist back then. And also there was no LEDs back then. So, to imagine it's got these weird lights and everything, they're not doing that in those days. I think maybe in 1971 the best you had was neon. And nobody can mistake neon. I mean, first of all, it's all in tubes, and it produces a lot of heat, and it's very delicate. I mean, you could break neon. So you got all these different things kind of going on here. So in 1971, he doesn't have the perspective that we have now. So can you imagine what it was like for him to be in this position? Because, granted, it would still be a little alarming for us. But at least now we would go, okay, maybe that's some random drone. I mean, let's just talk about, without getting too crazy, about all the drone stuff that happened recently in the New Jersey area and some other areas. Yeah, we all went a little insane, but we didn't go into pandemonium. Can you imagine if that would have happened in 1971? So like the rest of us. And I tell you, I would be the same way. Ronnie is scared. Obviously, he just saw something that scared the crap out of him. And he's just a kid with his dog. So what do you do when you're a kid with your dog out there in the middle of farmland? You run for your house. So Ronnie does just that. He runs inside. He's frantic. And he tells his mom, right? And her name's Irma. So they go out together, I think within 5 minutes or so. And I believe also his father, Darrell, did. And they both verified. And here's what gets interesting. Both his parents verified a glowing ring on the ground. This is where Ronnie said the object hovered. So I kind of get this sense that, it's like a burn ring. It's if it's moving and it's conducting all this energy, it's creating this physical ring there. And they all report that the ring is nearly perfectly circular. And it's approximately 8 feet in diameter. That's huge, guys. That's a big circle, okay? And what's interesting is what they say next. So they all report that the soil appears baked or chemically altered. I don't want to just skip over that for a second. I want you to picture that. You've seen this UFO. Your parents are out there. You go to this spot. Okay, there's a ring and it's glowing. But it has literally transformed the Earth. It has baked it and chemically altered it. And it's almost crusty. They even report it's like hard and slightly greasy to the touch. Now, if you ask me, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that I go touching the thing, because if you think it's chemically altered, especially this day and age, you always want to be protective of what kind of chemicals you're putting in yourself. Yeah, I don't know that I go touching it, especially if it starts becoming greasy. I'm out. I'm just telling you flat out, I am out. And with that, physical effects. So Ronnie touches the ground, right? And I'm sure the rest of them did too. Now, Ronnie later reports there's numbness in his fingertips for nearly 2 days. Can you imagine that? For 2 days, you can't feel your fingertips where you touch this thing. And his father describes it as unnatural soil. These are farmers, guys. They know what soil looks like. And it's something he had never seen in decades. So take it for what it is. You know, it's a couple of people that are, you know, some folks, a family. This is what they do. This is how they make a living, is the soil. They make a living by what they see in nature. They have no idea what this thing is. It's leaving this greasy, glowing, baked ring around the farm, and it's 8 feet in diameter, so it's not like it's tiny. Now, at night, over the next 3 to 4 nights, the family reports that the ring glows faintly in the dark. That is freaky, right? So it's glowing faintly in the dark, and I just keep thinking of the movie Signs and stuff, you know? I shouldn't make light of it, but it's like, holy crap, man. It's not bad enough that you go through all this stuff, but for the next 3 or 4 lights, you got this this circle glowing in the middle of your farm. And something that's even more interesting is they're not the only ones that saw it. Multiple witnesses can confirm this. Neighbors even stopped by to see it. So you got people traveling through your area, and they see, hey, what the heck's going on over there? The Johnsons got this green glow. I would assume it's green. I don't know. We got this glowing circle in the middle of their field. You know, it's not like it's Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I mean, we're talking about, you know, these people they know the land. It's not just the Johnsons. You got other people that I would imagine do the same thing. They're farmers. So anything out of the ordinary like that, they're going to notice it. So, of course, they report this thing, right? Now, this is where it's a little bit of a close to home story, because there's a group, an organization that comes out to visit, and they are APRO. Now, APRO stands for Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and they were based in Tucson, Arizona. And, I think they were active until like 1988. But they were originally started in, I believe, 1952. So by 1952, this is 1971. They've been around for a while, so they've definitely seen some things. So, of course, they send some folks out, and they get some samples of this soil, and they want to analyze this thing, right? So here's kind of the findings that they had, and this is interesting, because remember, can't hammer this home enough. This is farmland, okay? So they have found that the soil has hydrophobicity. I don't remember how to say that right. Basically, it just means that water won't absorb into the soil. It actually repels moisture for months. So, yeah, I know that this property can exist in some forms, but not where it wasn't before. I mean, we're talking about farm soil. Now, they also reported some chemical alterations, right? So they have found there's elevated levels of calcium and possible phosphates, okay? Some suggest exposure to high heat or radiation would have caused it. And others say that like crystalline or fungal structure have appeared in some soils under a microscope. So this is the kind of things that they're finding with this soil, right? Now, of course, photos are taken of the investigators and the family, and they're later published in UFO journals and books, and I'm sure you can find them out there. But, you know, of course, the soil is not the only thing that had some impact to it. Let's talk about the crops. It's a farm, so you got to watch. This is their bread and butter, okay? So crops immediately surrounding the ring show wilting, their growth is stunted, and they're discolored. And some plants refuse to grow back in the area for the following season. Now, you hear about these things with some of these UFO sightings where, you know, somebody sees it take off and it leaves or does whatever it's going to do, And you do hear about these burn marks. You hear about these spots where vegetation refuses to grow. You've even heard of wildlife refusing to go anywhere near it. So there's something definitely chemically altered. It probably smells different to them, but for sure, these plants wanted nothing to do with it. So here's where we talk a little bit about Ronnie, okay? Now, there's been some lingering effects from this, okay? And Ronnie is complaining of some symptoms. Now, he had already complained once before that his fingertips had gone numb. But now, after some time, he's starting to find that there's numbness in his hands and occasional dizziness for about 48 hours. Now, some researchers, of course, suggest exposure to EMF radiation or static field disruption. Now, we've talked a little bit about this. And if you had any experience with some of this, you do. You get that kind of like fun house feeling. You also get that kind of nauseous feeling too. It really just depends on how susceptible you are to radiation and to EMF. But yeah, you know, he's already reporting this, and this is a 17-year-old kid, so it's not like he's out there getting this anywhere else. And to include that, he is also a young man, so he's not feeling, you know, he doesn't have all the issues. He hasn't had the exposure that we've had to this EMF field. So it'd be very unusual, right? And that's just the physical part. Now, I'm unfortunately going to talk a little bit about the mental part. Now, this is a big part too. Ronnie becomes more withdrawn after the encounter. Now, you can also say, you know, it scared him, you know, and it does have an impact on you. If you're into the paranormal, obviously you're listening to this, you are. You know, sometimes you run into things that deeply impact you, and it takes a while to kind of get your mind wrapped around it. Now, for a 17-year-old kid in rural Kansas, this is probably pretty tough, you know. Now, some say he'd reported, well, this is kind of the tough part, but he began experiencing vivid dreams and strange lights at night. So, you know, kind of runs into that. What do you believe about these certain things? You know, do you believe that, I know you hear about abduction phenomenon, you hear about these other things, and you also hear about people who may have repeat encounters. We could talk for hours upon hours upon hours, and in fact, we've done shows in the main show about this. But you know, there's some distinction sometimes between people who have had visitation and stuff like that. But anyway, Ronnie never sought fame for this. You know, he didn't do it for like media tours, right? But what's important is his story never changed. Not once. Not once. Well, let's talk about Snowball, right? Snowball becomes a very anxious, nervous dog, and he is petrified of the shed area for months, right? Now, that's not unusual behavior, but as a farm dog, this is what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to go out there and help him work the field. So him having this anxious and this nervous feeling around the shed, that's not good, because that's obviously where you keep all your equipment. So I'm sure that had a big impact on that, right? And you also hear that Snowbark starts, I guess, randomly barking at night. Now, that's something he had never done before. So not only do you have the impact on Ronnie, both physically and mentally, it's obviously having a very big impact on the dog. Now, we're talking about two living beings that have had the same experience, and they're both very obviously impacted. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about the theories and kind of the legacy about this incident, right? So here are some credible theories, right? Quote unquote credible. Now, plasma-based propulsion. Now, this is like I said before, this is very consistent with modern UAP reports, especially from the U.S. Navy. They've had a lot of reports of this. So plasma-based propulsion, that's a big one. You know, depending on whether you believe in whether they're interdimensionally traveling or not, if it's propulsion-based, plasma makes sense, right? And a couple other theories. So the other one is a high heat landing residue. Now that explains that soil, right? And you got this crusting, you got this heating, you got all that tangible evidence from where it was close to. So, you know, and especially with the repelling moisture, high heat, right? That's still really difficult for me to wrap my head around, that it's literally repelling the moisture. All right, so let's talk about skeptic encounters. All right, so let's talk about skeptical counterpoints, because you kind of have to do that, right? If you're going to propose a quote unquote out of bounds theory, a wild encounter, you have to actually put the other side to it. How can it be explained? You know, where is the Occam's razor here? You know, that's one of my favorites, right? So a lot of people call it fairy ring fungus circle, right? I'm not sure exactly what the hell that is, but I got to bring it up because that is one of the counterpoints. And they basically quickly debunked this because fungus doesn't glow and it doesn't repel water, right? So, yeah, you do see these in these fungi, right? Fungi. You get what I'm at. But you do see it. You know, especially, in the ocean, there is that glowing from some of the algae and things like that. But it doesn't repel water, right? And, of course, the family gained nothing. You know, they didn't speak about it publicly. You know, again, we're going back to the idea that this is a very rural community. It's very small, 500 people, right? Everybody knows each other. So, you know, you have one of these phenomenon happen. And I think the one thing that always frustrates me, and I know it does for Nicole, is that people already want to say, oh, they're just in it for the press. They're in it for the ink, right? Well, that's where I kind of call bullshit a little, because they didn't stand to gain anything. In fact, they stood to gain or lose a lot. Not to mention it had an impact on their field. So it wasn't something that they looked for. It wasn't something that they wanted any kind of publicity for. And afterwards, they lived a very modest life, and they refused to sell the story, right? So that's kind of where the family kind of ended with it. Now, the legacy, it is still a major UFO case, right? So it's in the MUFON archives, and it is known. It's a very well-known case. Again, we may even cover this again in the main show. I thought it would work good for one of these, right? But it's often cited as one of the best physical trace cases in history. Think about that for a second. All this UFO phenomenon. We've got, you know, as of now, we've got drone footage. We've got all kinds of video evidence that we have collected. But way back in 1971 to this day, it's still one of the best physical trace cases. That's amazing. And of course, here we are 50 plus years later, and still no conventional explanation for the event. Nothing. Zilcho. So while we may have advanced in a lot of our technical capability, we still can't explain something that happened way back in 1971. So sometimes I like to tell people, hey, whoa. Pump your brakes, guys. If we can't figure out something that happened in 1971, what's to say that we're going to figure out something that happened in 1980 or hell, let's call it what it is, 2025. We still can't explain a lot of the stuff that we see out there. And we still can't rationalize it either. All right, so let's kind of break it down. Kind of getting at the end of this. Now, here we got this kid, a dog, and a glowing ring in the dirt. You know, at its core, it's very simple. You know, he sees this object. His dog responds to it. It literally burns a ring into the ground. So we got physical evidence, right? Now, these events, they're part of our mythos now, right? It's kind of like we all share this. It's a shared memory in weirdness in small town America, right? And it's one of those encounters that while it didn't happen in the summer, it's very important, you know? So I got to ask you, do you really think a 16-year-old faked radioactive soil and fooled investigators for decades? I don't know. Or did the stars come closer that night and just decide to leave a mark? You know? Anyway, next week, guys, we've got a great episode coming out. You're not going to want to miss it. Again, thank you so much for hanging around the campfire with me. And don't worry, we're working on some great stuff for the main show, and it'll be back very soon. And I think you're going to like where that direction's headed. But anyway, folks, have yourself a great day, and we'll be back for another campfire setting on Tinfoil and Tan Lines.